Josh, would you accept me as your father? A lonely, dying billionaire asked a hungry little girl, and with tears in her eyes, she said something unexpected. The ticking of the wall clock echoed through the empty corridors of the mansion, a sound Owen Faulkner rarely noticed. But that morning it seemed louder, as if counting down every second of his life. Owen adjusted his navy blue tie in front of the mirror. His reflection showed a 45-year-old man with graying hair at his temples and grey eyes that rarely smiled. There was nothing extraordinary about his appearance to betray his billions in fortune. He preferred it that way, discreet, almost invisible, despite the empire he had built. "Sir, the driver is waiting," said Martha, his housekeeper, the only voice besides his own that echoed in that enormous house. "Thank you," Owen replied, without looking at her. The annual medical checkup was just a formality. Owen couldn't remember the last time he'd been sick. His body, like his businesses, operated with Swiss precision. As the car glided through the city streets, he answered emails, made calls, and moved millions, with a few taps on his phone screen. The world outside was merely a moving backdrop through the tinted window. Dr. Harris's office had the soft scent of wood and old books. Owen sat in the leather chair, as he had for the past 15 years. The doctor, now with white strands in his beard, reviewed the tests with an expression Owen had never seen before. "Owen, how have you been feeling lately?" "Normal. Busy as always." "Any shortness of breath? Unusual fatigue?" Owen hesitated for a moment, perhaps after climbing stairs. "But nothing a man my age wouldn't expect." The doctor nodded, placing the papers on the desk. "We found something in your tests. Your heart is—" Dr. Harris paused, choosing his words carefully, "showing a condition that wasn't present last year." "What condition?" Owen's voice remained calm, as if discussing a simple business transaction. "Severe hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with complications. It's rare for it to develop so rapidly, but—" The doctor adjusted his glasses, uncomfortable with what he had to say. "The prognosis isn't favorable, Owen." Owen blinked once, then again. The words floated before him, not quite sinking in. How long?" The question came out automatically, as if from someone else. "Without a transplant, perhaps 6 months, a year, being optimistic." The doctor continued speaking. Treatments, medications, remote possibilities. But Owen no longer listened. His brain, so agile at calculating risks and opportunities in business, now seemed frozen, unable to process the only thing he could never buy: more time. "I'll request your inclusion on the transplant list immediately. But I need to be honest. With your age and the rarity of compatible donors—" "I understand," Owen cut him off. "Jane, what are the next steps?" He listened to the instructions, noted down the names of medications on his phone, and scheduled follow-up exams, all with the same cold efficiency he conducted business meetings. Only later, already in the car, did he feel the first tremor in his hands. The driver asked if he was all right. Owen merely nodded, looking out the window at the people on the sidewalk, all walking, running, living without knowing how much time they had left. Perhaps it was better that way. His phone vibrated. It was his assistant, reminding him of the investor meeting. Owen cancelled with a brief message. For the first time in decades, the numbers in his bank account seemed utterly irrelevant. When the car stopped in front of the mansion, he asked the driver to drop him at the entrance. He wanted to walk a bit through the garden. The autumn flowers swayed in the breeze, indifferent to the fact that their owner had just discovered his finitude. Owen unlocked the front door. Silence greeted him as it always did. He took off his shoes, left his jacket on the sofa. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor as he walked to the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was so large that his voice, if he screamed, would echo. There was no one to hear anyway. In the living room, he paused before the wall filled with awards, certificates, and photos with celebrities and politicians. Evidence of what the world called success. No family photos. No faces smiling because of him, not for what he could offer. He poured himself a whiskey and walked out to the veranda overlooking the gardens. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Owen tried to remember the last time he had truly watched a sunset. He couldn't. The diagnosis finally began to settle in his mind. It wasn't the fear of death that bothered him, he realized. It was the fact that his absence from this world would go virtually unnoticed. The newspapers would report it, of course. The financial market would feel a momentary shock. There would be a funeral with many important people saying important things about a man they barely knew. And then, nothing. Owen took a sip of his drink, feeling the warmth spread down his throat. He had spent his entire life building an empire and had completely forgotten to build a life. The phone rang inside the house. Probably work matters. Owen didn't move to answer it. Instead, he stood there, watching the first stars appear in the sky, wondering if there was still time for something more than simply existing. 6 months, perhaps a year. What does a man who has everything but time do with the days he has left? The answer didn't come. Only the silence of the empty mansion and the growing weight of loneliness that now, finally, he allowed himself to feel. Owen walked aimlessly through the city's dark streets. The October chill pierced his expensive coat as if it were made of paper. He barely noticed. His thoughts were too heavy with the doctor's words echoing in his mind. 6 months. A year. Being optimistic. The diagnosis had changed everything and nothing at the same time. Life continued around him, cars passing, hurried people returning home, lights flickering in shop windows. But now, every moment seemed marked by an invisible clock. What's the point of all this money, he thought, passing a closed jewelry store window, billions in bank accounts, properties on 3 continents, and no one to share it with. No one who truly cared if he lived or died. Unbeknownst to him, Owen had drifted away from his upscale neighborhood. The streets were now narrower, the buildings older, the lights dimmer. At another time in his life, he would have felt uncomfortable, perhaps even vulnerable. Now, with death lurking, none of that mattered. That's when he saw her. In the gap between 2 closed commercial buildings, a small figure rummaged through trash cans. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, in a thin, torn coat, scoured discarded scraps for food. Her dark hair was tangled and dirty. Even in the dim light, Owen could see she was shivering in the cold night air. Something about that scene paralyzed him. The girl was completely alone. No adults nearby, no supervision, just a child struggling to survive in a cold, indifferent world, like him. The realization hit him with surprising force. He, a billionaire with mansions in 3 countries, and she, a child rummaging through trash, both equally solitary, both with no one who truly cared. Without thinking, Owen took a step toward the alley. The sound of his shoe on the asphalt startled the girl, who turned around abruptly. Their eyes met, his tired and empty, hers frightened and suspicious. Owen stopped, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. Something inside him stirred, an impulse that came from a place he didn't even know existed. Before he could analyze or think about the consequences, the words came out, "Would you accept me as your father?" The question hung in the cold night air, as unexpected to Owen as it surely was to the girl. She tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes fixed on his, as if trying to determine if she had heard correctly or if it was some kind of trick. Her small fingers tightened around a piece of stale bread she had found. She took a step back, wary, assessing the well-dressed man in front of her. "If it means food and a place to sleep, I accept," she finally replied, her voice small but determined. The answer, so practical and direct, caught Owen by surprise. There was no emotion there, just the basic logic of survival. It hit him with painful clarity. For her, it wasn't about family or affection, but about unmet needs. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. "Hannah," she replied, still keeping her distance. "I'm Owen. Are you hungry now, Hannah?" She nodded slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "There's a diner across the street," Owen said, pointing to a brightly lit establishment. "We can get something warm to eat. What do you think?" Hannah looked in the direction indicated, then back at him. Her eyes moved from his expensive coat to his polished shoes, assessing. "I don't have money," she said, as if needing to make that clear. "I do," Owen replied simply. A silence settled between them. The distrust in Hannah's eyes was palpable, but there was also something more, a spark of hope she tried to hide. "What do you like to eat?" Owen asked, trying to establish some connection. "A hamburger," she replied after a pause. "With fries. Great choice. I like those too." Another silence. Owen didn't move closer, respecting her space. "Why do you want to be my father?" Hannah finally asked, the question surprisingly direct for such a young child. Owen wasn't prepared for this. How to explain loneliness, terminal diagnoses, and the sudden realization of one's own mortality to a 5-year-old? "Because I'm alone," he replied simply. "Like you." The honesty of the answer seemed to resonate with Hannah. She took a small step forward, still clutching the piece of bread. "Did your parents die too?" "Yes," Owen said. "A long time ago." "Mine too," Hannah said. "My mom died. My dad left and never came back." "I'm sorry," Hannah shrugged, as if it were just a fact of life. "Do you live near here?" she asked. "Not too far. I have a big house. Lots of empty rooms." "Is there food there?" "Plenty of food," Owen confirmed, "but we can eat at the diner first if you prefer." Hannah seemed to consider the offer. The wind blew harder, making her shiver in her thin coat. She coughed, a dry, worrying sound. "It's very cold out here," Owen said. "Shall we go inside?" "You can order anything you want." After another moment of hesitation, Hannah nodded. Owen extended his hand but didn't insist when she didn't take it. Instead, they began to walk side by side toward the diner, separated by a cautious distance. The diner was one of those simple 24-hour places, with red vinyl booths and yellowed formica tables. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with her hair in a messy bun, raised her eyebrows at the sight of the strange duo entering. "Table for two?" she asked, her tone slightly suspicious. Owen nodded, leading Hannah to a booth in the back. The girl sat shyly, her feet swinging without touching the floor. Her eyes scanned the place, absorbing every detail. "So what will you have?" Owen asked when they received the menus. Hannah looked at the menu with pictures, her small fingers lightly touching the images. "Can I really order anything?" "Of course, whatever you want." "A big hamburger," she said, pointing to the picture. Then, testing the limits, she added, "and French fries. And a chocolate milkshake." "Sounds perfect," Owen replied with a slight smile. When the waitress returned, he placed Hannah's order and only asked for a coffee for himself. The woman still seemed suspicious, but her expression softened a little when she saw the child's hungry gaze. "Where have you been sleeping, Hannah?" Owen asked when they were alone. "Different places," she replied vaguely. "There's a bench in the park that's good when it doesn't rain." The simplicity with which she described her struggle for survival made something tighten in Owen's chest. "How long have you been alone?" Hannah shrugged slightly. "I don't really know. Many days. I used to count, but then I forgot." The food arrived, interrupting the conversation. Hannah's eyes lit up at the sight of the steaming hamburger and golden fries. She looked at Owen as if asking for permission. "Go ahead," he said. "It's all yours." Hannah picked up the hamburger with both hands and took a large bite. For a moment, her face transformed with pure delight. She ate quickly, almost without chewing. "Slow down," Owen advised gently. "It's not going anywhere." The girl slowed down, but only slightly. Between bites, she occasionally glanced at the door, as if fearing someone might come in and take her meal. "Do you really have a big house?" she asked, her mouth full of fries. "Yes," Owen replied. "Too big for just one person. There's a room I think you'll like. It's light blue, with a view of the garden." Hannah took a sip of her milkshake, leaving a chocolate mustache on her upper lip. "Why do you live alone?" "I never married, never had children," Owen replied. I was always busy with work." "What kind of work do you do?" "I run companies, I do business." Hannah nodded as if she understood, though she clearly didn't. "Are you rich then?" The direct question made Owen smile slightly. "Yes, I am. Rich like having lots of toys." "We can buy any toys you want." Hannah's eyes widened, but she tried to disguise her reaction as if she feared showing too much interest. "If I go with you," she began, hesitantly, "can I leave if I want to?" The question took Owen by surprise. It was too astute for a 5-year-old, but perhaps it was the kind of shrewdness that came from the need for survival. "Yes," he replied honestly. You're not my prisoner, Hannah. I just want to offer you a safe place, food, clothes, a home. She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to read the truth in his eyes. Okay, she finally said. As Hannah finished eating, Owen noticed that her clothes were not only dirty but completely unsuitable for the cold. I think we need to get you some new clothes, he said. Your coat seems too thin for this cold. The stores are closed now, Hannah observed, looking out the window at the dark street. I know a place that's open 24 hours, Owen replied. We can go there later, if you're not too tired. Hannah nodded, biting into the last French fry. I'm not tired. Owen paid the bill, leaving a generous tip. When they stepped out onto the street, the cold seemed even more intense. Without thinking, he took off his own coat and placed it over Hannah's shoulders. But you'll be cold, she protested, though she was already snuggling into the oversized coat. I'm fine, Owen replied, feeling the wind cut through his thin suit. Strange how he didn't care about the discomfort. Let's find a taxi. A yellow taxi stopped when he hailed it. The driver gave the strange pair a curious look, but asked no questions when Owen gave the address of the shopping center. During the ride, Hannah remained silent, looking out the window at the city lights. Every now and then, she glanced at Owen, as if to check if he was still there. The shopping center was almost deserted at that hour of the night. The large department store had only a few bored employees, who barely disguised their surprise at seeing the strange pair, an obviously rich man and a visibly street-worn girl. My daughter needs new clothes, Owen said to the sales assistant, the words feeling strange on his tongue. The woman nodded, leading them to the children's section. Hannah stayed close to Owen, intimidated by the bright lights and the immense space of the store. You can choose anything you want, Owen said. Hannah looked at the racks of colorful clothes, clearly overwhelmed by so many options. I don't know what to choose, she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. Let's start with the basics then, Owen suggested, picking out coats, pants, t-shirts, and pajamas that he thought would fit her. Hannah touched each piece with reverence, as if they were treasures. When they passed the toy section, her eyes fixed on a brown teddy bear with a red ribbon around its neck. She didn't ask for it, just looked at it for a long time before looking away. Owen picked up the teddy bear and offered it to her. Would you like this too? Hannah nodded shyly, a small smile appearing on her face for the first time that night. They left the store with several bags. In the taxi back, Hannah held the new teddy bear close to her chest, occasionally whispering something into its furry ear. Owen watched her out of the corner of his eye, a strange sense of protectiveness growing within him. When the taxi finally drove up the long driveway of the estate, Hannah's eyes widened. The mansion, illuminated by strategically placed lights, looked like something out of a fairy tale. Is this where you live? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. Yes, Owen replied. And now you do too, if you want. Hannah didn't answer, just stared at the mansion in astonishment as the taxi stopped in front of the main entrance. They got out of the car, Hannah still clinging to the teddy bear and wrapped in Owen's oversized coat. She stood still, gazing at the imposing building. Do you live here all alone? She asked ingenuously. Owen merely responded with a nod, the innocent question highlighting the emptiness of his existence in a way no one ever had before. Hannah took a few hesitant steps toward the door, waiting for Owen to open it. When they entered the spacious grand hall, with its marble floor and crystal chandelier, she slowly spun around, taking in the grandeur of the place. In that moment, Owen knew his life had changed forever. The diagnosis had given him a death sentence, but also, unexpectedly, it had given him something he never thought he'd have, a chance not to be alone for the time he had left. And as he watched the small, awestruck figure in the middle of his grand hall, he felt that the empty space he called home was finally beginning to transform. In the first mornings, Owen would wake with a start, as if he'd dreamed something important he couldn't recall. Then, the soft sound of footsteps in the hallway would bring everything back. He was no longer alone. A child now lived under his roof. Hannah's room had been just an empty space, one among dozens in the mansion. In a few days, it came to life. Owen had appropriate furniture brought in for a 5-year-old girl, a smaller bed at the right height, a colourful dresser, shelves for books and toys. The walls, once a neutral blue, now displayed glow-in-the-dark star stickers. Hannah explored the house with the caution of a small animal in unfamiliar territory. At first, she rarely ventured far from her own room. Owen often found her sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching her teddy bear, as if waiting for instructions on what she could or couldn't do. "The house is yours too," he told her one morning, as he watched her hesitate before the stairs leading downstairs. "You can go anywhere you want." Hannah nodded but didn't seem convinced. Years of street survival had taught her that everything had a price, that kindnesses were rarely free. "Shall we have breakfast?" Owen invited, extending his hand. She descended the steps, holding his hand, each step measured and silent. Martha, the housekeeper, had reacted with restrained surprise upon discovering the new resident. Professional as ever, she merely inquired about food preferences and allergies. Now she prepared breakfast for two, leaving it ready before going to attend to other parts of the house. "Do you like pancakes?" Owen asked, indicating the plate Martha had left. Hannah looked at the food with wide eyes. "Is this breakfast?" "Yes." "Don't you like it?" "I've never eaten this." Owen felt that familiar pang in his chest, a mix of compassion and anger for what that child had endured. "Try it. If you don't like it, we can make something else." Hannah tasted a small piece, and her face lit up. She ate the rest with enthusiasm, syrup dripping down her chin. Owen realized he was smiling as he watched her. A genuine smile, the kind he hadn't given in years. In the following days, he began to relieve Martha of breakfast duties. He woke up earlier and made pancakes, scrambled eggs, or whatever Hannah requested himself. He wasn't a great cook, but he discovered he enjoyed trying. The girls' approving smiles were reward enough for the crooked pancakes and occasionally overcooked eggs. The kitchen, previously a functional space rarely used by him, transformed into the heart of the home. Hannah sat on the counter, swinging her legs, watching him cook. At first, she barely spoke. Then she began to ask simple questions. Why does the egg get hard when you cook it? How does bread grow in the oven? Why is the sky blue? Owen, accustomed to dealing with complex business matters, found himself challenged to explain basic things about the world in a way a child could understand. It was refreshing. One morning, about 2 weeks after Hannah's arrival, he was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when he heard hurried footsteps on the stairs. She appeared at the doorway, still in her pajamas, her dark hair disheveled. "Good morning," she said, her voice cheerful. "Good morning," Owen replied, surprised by her sudden enthusiasm. "I dreamed I had a dog," she informed him, climbing onto the high stool with newfound agility. "It was big and brown and licked my face." "Oh, really?" Owen placed a glass of orange juice in front of her. "And did you like that dog?" "Yes. Can we get one?" The question caught him off guard. It was the first time Hannah had asked for something directly, without circumlocution or hesitation. "Perhaps," he replied, thoughtfully. "I've never had pets." "Me neither," she said, drinking her juice. "But I saw kids with dogs at the park." It was true. The day before, Owen had taken Hannah to the park near the house. She had watched other children playing, especially those with pets, but had not approached anyone. "I'll think about it," he promised. From that day on, Hannah's good morning became an essential part of the routine. Owen found himself waiting for it, planning breakfast based on what she had liked the day before, eager to see her sleepy face appear at the kitchen door. The house, so long silent, now filled with small sounds, footsteps running down the hall, muffled laughter as Hannah discovered something new, the muffled sound of the TV tuned to cartoon channels. Owen adjusted his work meetings to the periods when Hannah watched her favorite shows or took an afternoon nap. He avoided business trips, delegating tasks he would have previously handled personally. His assistant noticed the change, but didn't comment, merely reorganizing his schedule to accommodate the new timings. In the evening, a new routine was established. After dinner, Hannah would take a bath, no longer needing help as she made sure to emphasize, and put on one of her new pajamas. Owen would find her in bed, surrounded by the children's books they had bought. "Which one today?" he would ask, sitting on the edge of the bed. Hannah would choose carefully, as if it were a decision of utmost importance. At first, she preferred stories with many illustrations and few words. Over time, she came to appreciate longer tales, occasionally interrupting to ask about words she didn't know. Owen discovered he loved these moments. The voice he used for different characters, the expressions of wonder or joy on Hannah's face, the sense of calm that enveloped him as he read. It was as if the world outside, with its board meetings, stock quotes, and the fatal diagnosis hanging over his head, simply disappeared during those stories. After reading, Hannah would hug him with surprising strength for someone so small. "Good night, Owen," she would say. She still didn't call him Dad, and he didn't insist. He knew that trust and affection couldn't be forced. "Good night, Hannah," he would reply, adjusting the covers around her. The first time Owen truly realized how much his life had changed was on an ordinary Wednesday, about a month after Hannah's arrival. He was in his home office, reviewing contracts, when the phone rang. It was his cardiologist, reminding him about a follow-up appointment that Owen had postponed twice. "Mr. Faulkner, your condition requires constant monitoring," the doctor said, his voice serious. "We need to check how the medication is working." "I'll be there tomorrow," Owen promised. As he hung up, he realized he hadn't thought about his illness in days. The pills remained on his nightstand, and he took them mechanically. But the death sentence that once occupied every waking moment had receded to a distant corner of his mind. He got up and went to the window. In the garden, Hannah was playing under Martha's supervision. She had found a butterfly and was carefully following it across the grass, talking to the insect as if it could understand her. Owen smiled. The prospect of dying hadn't changed, but his view of the time he had left had. Now, each day felt like an opportunity, not a countdown. That night, after the usual story, Hannah didn't lie down immediately. "Owen," she said, her voice serious for a 5-year-old, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Did you have a family before?" The question caught him off guard. Hannah rarely asked personal questions. "I did," he replied after a moment. "My parents. I don't have siblings." "Where are your parents?" Owen adjusted himself on the edge of the bed. "My mother died when I was young. I was 15. "What was she like?" Hannah asked, hugging her teddy bear. No one had asked Owen that in decades. The image of his mother came to mind. Dark hair like Hannah's, kind eyes, hands always busy with some work. "She was kind," he finally said. "She liked music, played the piano, sang to me when I was little. Did she get sick?" "Yes." Her heart stopped working properly. Owen didn't mention that his own heart condition was similar to what had taken his mother. Some truths were too heavy to share with a child. "And your father?" "He lived longer. He passed away 10 years ago." "Did you like him?" The question, so direct, made him reflect. His relationship with his father had been complicated. After his mother's death, the man had become even more rigid and distant, as if he feared that getting emotionally close to his son might cause more pain. "My father was difficult," he answered honestly. "He wanted me to be strong, successful. He didn't show his feelings much." "Did he hug you?" "Rarely." "That's sad," Hannah said with the devastating simplicity of children. "Yes," Owen agreed. "I guess it is." "I like when you hug me," she declared, as if that settled the matter. "I like it too," Owen replied, feeling something warm and strange in his chest. Hannah smiled and finally lay down, pulling the covers up to her chin. "Good night, Owen." "Good night, Hannah." As he left the room, Owen stopped in the hallway, leaning against the wall. The simple conversation had unearthed emotions he had carefully kept sealed for years. His father, always demanding excellence, never satisfied, had shaped much of who Owen had become. Focused on achievements, uncomfortable with feelings, skilled at accumulating power and wealth, but incapable of genuine connections. Until now. The following weeks brought more changes. Hannah began attending a private preschool near the house. Owen completely reorganized his schedule so he could personally drop her off and pick her up every day. The headmistress looked curiously at the reserved billionaire who appeared promptly at the gate, but asked no questions about Hannah's background. The adoption paperwork was in progress. Owen's lawyer had explained that the process would be complex, especially without official documentation about Hannah's biological parents. Investigations would be needed, supervised adaptation periods, psychological evaluations. Owen agreed to everything, determined to do whatever it took to ensure Hannah stayed with him. The house gained new spaces. An empty room transformed into a playroom. A wall in Owen's office now displayed colorful handmade drawings. The garden, once impeccably ornamental, gained a swing set and a small tree house. One Saturday afternoon, as Hannah played with building blocks on the living room rug, Owen watched her from the sofa. He had just finished reading a quarterly report for one of his companies. Impressive numbers, record profits, and realized he didn't feel the usual satisfaction. Instead, he found himself completely absorbed by the way Hannah's tongue poked out of the corner of her mouth when she concentrated on fitting two difficult pieces together. "I did it," she exclaimed when the structure stood upright. "Look, Owen." "Very good," he praised. "What is it?" "It's our house," she explained, pointing to different parts of the construction. "This is your room, this is my room, this is where we eat pancakes." "It's a perfect house," Owen said, sitting on the floor beside her. "When I grow up, I want a house just like this," Hannah declared, adding another block to the structure. "But smaller, this one's too big." "Oh, really?" Owen asked, genuinely curious. "Why?" "Because we only need enough space to be happy," she replied, as if it were obvious. "Gareth, the rest is wasted." Owen looked at the child in front of him, marveling at the wisdom contained in those simple words. Hannah was right, of course. The mansion, with its countless empty rooms and rarely used halls, was a monument to excess, not to happiness. "You know what?" he said. "You're very smart." "I know," Hannah replied with a little smile. "My teacher said so too," Owen laughed. A genuine laugh, the kind that had become more frequent in recent weeks. Hannah looked at him in surprise, then started laughing too, though she probably didn't understand exactly why. In that moment, sitting on the floor of his expensive living room, laughing with a child who had recently been rummaging through trash to survive, Owen felt something he didn't immediately recognize. It was a light, almost physical sensation, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Later, lying in his bed, he realized what it was. For the first time in decades, he felt part of something bigger than himself. He was no longer just Owen Faulkner, the lonely billionaire with a corporate empire. He was someone who made pancakes in the morning, read stories at night, and had drawings hanging in his office. He was, in a way, a family. Not the one he had always imagined having someday, in a distant future that never arrived. Not the traditional family his father expected him to form, but a family nonetheless, imperfect, improvised, built on a chance encounter on a cold night. A family that, despite its short existence, had already changed everything. The rain poured heavily outside, turning the garden into glistening puddles. The dark sky made it seem like night, though the clock showed only 3 in the afternoon. Owen had cancelled his meetings, something that had become increasingly common lately. On days like this, he preferred to stay home. Hannah was sitting on the large living room sofa, legs crossed, drawing on a paper pad. Beside her, a mug of hot chocolate slowly cooled. Owen watched her from a nearby armchair, pretending to read a financial report, but actually absorbing every expression that crossed the little girl's concentrated face. A loud clap of thunder made the windows vibrate. Hannah looked up from her drawing, startled. "It's just noise," Owen said, trying to reassure her. "The storm is far away." "I'm not scared," she replied, returning to her drawing. After a few strokes, she added, "I used to be. Used to be. When I lived on the street, it was bad when it rained hard." Hannah rarely spoke about her life before meeting Owen. He never pressed, sensing that the memories were too painful for someone so young. "Did you get wet?" he asked, carefully. Hannah nodded, continuing to draw. "And it was cold. I had to find places to hide." She paused, her small hand stopping on the paper. "Once a man let me stay at his shop door. He gave me a blanket. It was nice." Owen felt a tightening in his chest, imagining Hannah huddled in a doorway, shivering under a thin blanket. Did many people help you? Some, she replied, shrugging. Others would yell at me to leave. They said I scared away customers. She spoke without self-pity, merely stating facts, which made it even more painful for Owen. How long were you alone? Hannah frowned, thoughtful. I don't really know, a long time. Ever since Tom left me in the park. Tom? My mom's boyfriend. He wasn't my real dad. Owen put the report aside, giving his full attention to the conversation. Do you want to tell me about your mom? Hannah dropped her pencil and pulled her knees to her chest, hugging her legs. She was pretty. She had hair like mine, and she sang me to sleep. What happened to her? She got sick. She slept a lot. Then she didn't wake up anymore. The simplicity of the answer contained an immense tragedy. Owen tried to imagine the impact of his mother's death on such a small child. And then, Tom took care of me for a while, but he drank a lot. He got angry. He said he couldn't take care of a child. Hannah paused, her eyes fixed on some distant point. One day he said we were going for a walk. He took me to a park. He told me to wait on the bench, that he was going to buy ice cream. He never came back. Owen felt a wave of anger at the man who had abandoned a small child to fend for herself. He took a deep breath, controlling his emotion. How old were you? I think 4. And how did you survive after that? Hannah shrugged again. I waited for him to come back. Then I got hungry and asked people for food. Some gave it to me. I learned to find places to sleep, to run from adults who seemed dangerous. She spoke as if describing a normal routine, not the desperate struggle of an abandoned child. You are very brave, Hannah, Owen said, his voice low. I had no choice, she replied with a wisdom beyond her years. A silence settled between them, filled only by the sound of rain on the windows. Hannah returned to drawing, apparently ending the subject. But Owen felt it was important to share as well, to build a bridge between their experiences. I also lost my mother when I was young, he finally said. Hannah looked up from her drawing, interested. Were you small like me? Not so much, I was 15. But I was still a boy. What happened to her? She got sick, like your mum. Her heart wasn't working right. Did you cry? Hannah asked, her dark eyes fixed on his. The question caught him off guard with its direct simplicity. Yes, he replied, remembering the teenager he had been, lost in a pain he didn't know how to express. I cried a lot. Me too, Hannah confessed, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. But Tom said crying was for babies. Tom was wrong, Owen said firmly. There's nothing wrong with crying when we're sad. Hannah nodded, absorbing the information. And your dad, she asked, did he take care of you? Owen hesitated, organizing his thoughts. How to explain his complex relationship with his father to a 5-year-old? Yes, he took care of me, but in a different way. How? My father thought I needed to be strong, independent. He didn't like to show feelings. After my mother died, he became even more distant. He didn't hug you, Hannah asked, her brow furrowed as if trying to understand. Rarely. That's sad. Yes, Owen agreed. But I think he did the best he could. Some people just don't know how to show what they feel. Hannah seemed to ponder this. Then, to Owen's surprise, she got up from the sofa and came to his armchair. Without a word, she climbed onto his lap and hugged him tightly, her thin arms wrapping around his neck. I know how to show it, she said simply. Owen felt something break inside him, a barrier he hadn't even known existed. He wrapped his arms around the small figure, feeling her warmth against his chest. For a moment, they remained like that, enveloped in the sound of rain beating against the windows. We're alike, you know, Owen said softly. How? We both lost important people. We were alone, but now we've found each other. Hannah pulled back slightly to look at him, her small face inches from his. You won't leave me like Tom, will you? The question, so direct and laden with vulnerability, hit Owen to his core. How could he promise he wouldn't leave her when his own heart was on a countdown? But looking into those trusting eyes, he knew he had to offer some certainty. I'll do everything I can to stay with you, Hannah. And even if something happens to me someday, I'll make sure you're never alone again. She seemed satisfied with the answer and rested her head on his shoulder again. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside that room something had changed. Two survivors, marked by different but equally profound losses, had found in each other something they both thought they had lost forever: a home. Weeks had flown by since Hannah entered Owen's life. The routine at the mansion gained new rhythms, new sounds, new colors. The adoption process moved forward, albeit with the typical slowness of bureaucracy. The social worker visited regularly, always impressed with the girl's adaptation and Owen's visible effort to create a suitable environment. That Monday began like any other. Owen took Hannah to school, promising to pick her up in the late afternoon. He had an important meeting with investors, something he had been postponing but could no longer put off. The meeting stretched for hours. Numbers, projections, market strategies. Owen answered questions with his usual precision, but something had changed in his approach. Decisions he would have made without hesitation before now passed through a new filter. How would they affect his time with Hannah? Would it be worth embarking on a project that would require constant travel for the next few months? Owen. His finance director's voice brought him back. What do you think of the proposal? I need to analyze a few more details, he replied, buying time. Let's discuss this tomorrow. When the meeting finally ended, Owen felt a persistent ache in his temples. The doctor had warned him about this. Stress could worsen his heart condition. He needed to better manage work pressures. Upon arriving home with Hannah, Owen could barely keep his eyes open. The headache had worsened, and he felt a fatigue that seemed to penetrate to his bones. Are you okay? Hannah asked as they climbed the stairs, her small hand holding his. Just a little tired, Owen replied, trying to smile. It was a long day. Hannah watched him carefully, her dark eyes assessing every detail of Owen's pale face, the deep circles under his eyes, his less erect posture than usual. In the living room, Owen sank heavily onto the sofa, closing his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he saw Hannah standing in front of him, her expression serious. Now go rest, she said with surprising firmness for someone so small. Now I'll take care of you. Owen blinked, confused. What? You always take care of me, Hannah explained, crossing her arms like a miniature responsible adult. Now you're tired, I'll take care of you. Before Owen could protest, Hannah had already left the room. He heard her hurried footsteps in the hallway, going upstairs, then coming down again. She returned carrying a blanket, dragging it across the floor, actually, as it was bigger than her. With visible effort, she tried to spread it over Owen's legs. Let me help, he offered, but Hannah shook her head, determined. No. You stay still. Owen obeyed, watching tenderly as she struggled to cover him properly. When she finally succeeded, she stepped back to assess her work, her brow furrowed in concentration. Now don't move, she ordered, before leaving the room again. This time, her footsteps headed towards the kitchen. Owen heard the sound of the refrigerator opening, followed by the sound of running water. A few minutes later, Hannah returned, carefully carrying a glass of water with both hands, the liquid swaying dangerously close to the rim. Drink, she said, offering the glass when she reached the sofa. Water is good for you. Owen took the glass, taking a sip to please her. The truth was he was thirsty, but hadn't realized it until that moment. Thank you, Hannah. She nodded, serious, and left again. She returned shortly after with an apple and some grapes on a plate. Martha said fruit is good when you're sick, she explained, placing the plate on the coffee table. Are you sick? No, Owen replied. Just tired. Hannah didn't seem entirely convinced. She climbed onto the sofa beside him, studying his face intently. My mum used to get like this sometimes, she said, her voice low. Tired. I used to get water for her too. Owen felt a pang in his chest, imagining Hannah, even smaller, taking care of a sick mother. Did you take good care of her? Hannah nodded, her gaze distant for a moment. She used to say I was her special nurse. Returning to the present, Hannah adjusted the blanket over Owen, pulling it up to his chin just as he did for her every night. Now you need to rest, she instructed him. Close your eyes. Owen smiled, but obeyed, closing his eyes. He felt Hannah's small hand on his forehead, as if checking his temperature, a gesture she had probably learned from him or Martha. "You're not hot," she announced, seeming relieved, "but you still need to rest." Owen opened his eyes and found Hannah's face inches from his, her expression serious and concerned. "You know what would help a lot?" he suggested. "Say if you stayed here with me." She considered for a moment, then nodded. "Can I tell you a story to help you sleep?" "I'd love that." Hannah settled beside him on the sofa, under the blanket. She began to tell a very unique version of Cinderella, mixing elements from different tales Owen had read to her. Owen listened to her, feeling a strange warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't the pain he was getting used to, but something different, almost forgotten. He realized, with surprise, that his eyes were moist. In all his adult life, he couldn't remember being cared for like this. Of course, he had employees who met his needs, doctors who treated his illnesses, assistants who organized his life, but they were all paid for it. No one, since his mother, had simply cared for him, without expectations, without obligations, just out of affection. Hannah continued her elaborate story, gesticulating animatedly with her small hands. She didn't notice the solitary tear that ran down Owen's face, and then the prince found the shoe, but it didn't fit anyone because it was too small. Only Cinderella had a child's foot. Owen smiled through his suppressed tears, charmed by the child's logic. "That's a great story," he said when she finally reached the happily ever after. "Did you really like it?" Hannah asked, her eyes shining. "It was the best story I've ever heard." She smiled, proud, and snuggled closer to him. "Are you feeling better?" "Much better," Owen replied honestly. "You're a great nurse." "I know," she said with the simple confidence of children. Then more softly, "Now I take care of you and you take care of me, okay?" "Okay," Owen agreed, his voice thick with emotion. They stayed like that, side by side on the sofa, the blanket covering both views as the afternoon slowly faded. At some point, Hannah fell asleep, her head resting on Owen's arm. He watched her sleeping, her small face relaxed, her long eyelashes against her cheeks. How was it possible that this child, who had been through so much, still had such a capacity for love, to care? Owen realized he had spent his entire life seeking something, success, recognition, power, when what truly mattered was here, in this simple moment of human connection. The headache had vanished, the fatigue remained, but now it seemed less important. What mattered was asleep beside him, small and vulnerable, but with an inner strength that amazed him. "Now I'll take care of you." Hannah's simple words echoed in his mind, healing something he didn't even know was broken. The days at the mansion settled into their own rhythm. What was once a silent, empty house now pulsed with the energy of a child. Owen discovered he enjoyed routines, not the rigid, impersonal ones that marked his corporate life, but the small traditions he and Hannah created together. Mornings started early. Hannah would wake with the sun, and often Owen would find her already sitting in bed, chatting softly with her teddy bear. Breakfast together became sacred. Pancakes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, scrambled eggs on Mondays and Wednesdays, cereal on weekends, small rituals that anchored their days. One Saturday morning, while they were eating, Hannah watched Owen reading the newspaper. "I want to learn to read too," she said, pointing to the printed letters. Owen lowered the newspaper, surprised. "But would you like me to teach you?" Hannah nodded, determined. "I want to read stories by myself." That same afternoon, Owen transformed a corner of the library into a small classroom. He bought colorful notebooks, soft pencils, children's books with large letters and vibrant illustrations. Hannah sat at the low table he had provided, her feet swinging above the floor, her eyes attentive. "Let's start with the alphabet," Owen said, drawing large letters on a whiteboard he had installed on the wall. Hannah repeated each letter, tracing them carefully in her notebook. Her tongue would peek out of the corner of her mouth when she concentrated, a habit Owen found adorable. "This one's hard," she complained when they reached R. "Try again," Owen encouraged. "It doesn't have to be perfect." After a few frustrated attempts, Hannah finally succeeded. She held up her notebook, proudly displaying the letter. "Look, I did it." "It's perfect," Owen praised, feeling a satisfaction no successful business had ever given him. Reading sessions became part of their daily routine. Half an hour after breakfast, before Hannah went to preschool, and another half an hour before dinner, Owen was surprised by how quickly she learned. In a few weeks, she recognized all the letters and began to form simple words. House, she spelled one night, pointing to each letter in the book. House. Exactly, Owen confirmed. And where is this house? Hannah pointed to the colorful illustration. In the forest. It's where the bunny lives. And where is our house? Hannah thought for a moment. On the hill. It's the biggest one of all. And do you like living here? A wide smile lit up her face. It's the best house in the world. Something warm expanded in Owen's chest. The mansion, which for so long had been merely a symbol of status, an investment, was now a home, a refuge. The best house in the world, according to the only opinion that truly mattered. Hannah's drawings began to appear everywhere. At first, Owen carefully stored them in a folder like treasures. Then he realized they should be displayed, celebrated. He bought colorful frames and began hanging them on the walls. The first was a portrait of the two of them, stick figures, one large and one small, holding hands under a smiling sun. Owen hung it in his office, where he could see it while he worked. Did you really like it? Hannah asked, watching him fix the frame to the wall. It's my favorite piece of art, he replied sincerely. Hannah smiled, her eyes sparkling with pride, and ran off to make more drawings. Soon the mansion, once decorated with expensive paintings and exclusive sculptures, gained a new art gallery. Drawings of colorful trees in the hallway, a series of animals, some recognizable, others completely imaginary, in the living room, a huge rainbow in the entrance hall. Martha, the housekeeper, initially seemed disconcerted by the transformation, but Owen caught her one day carefully adjusting a crooked frame, a soft smile on her usually austere face. She has talent, Martha commented. The house feels more alive now. Owen agreed. Everything felt more alive now. Writing came soon after reading. Hannah practiced forming letters, then words, on sheets of colored paper. Her first complete word, written without help, was Owen. She handed it to him one morning, proud of her creation. Look, I wrote your name. The letters were large and uneven. The E was backward, but to Owen it was the most beautiful handwriting he had ever seen. I'll keep it forever, he said, putting the paper in his pocket. Later, when Hannah was at school, Owen had that piece of paper framed. He placed it on his bedside table, the last thing he saw before sleeping and the first thing he saw upon waking. As time passed, Hannah's abilities grew, as did Owen's confidence as a father. He had never imagined himself teaching someone to tie shoelaces, to use cutlery correctly, to say please and thank you. Now, these simple lessons filled his days. One night, after dinner, Hannah asked to make cookies. I've never made cookies before, Owen confessed. Neither have I, Hannah said, but we can learn together. Owen found a simple recipe online. Together they measured flour, spilling most of it on the floor, cracked eggs with shell fragments that needed to be fished out of the batter, and mixed everything in a large bowl. The kitchen, usually immaculate, transformed into a culinary battleground. Hannah had flour in her hair, butter on her cheeks, and a smile that lit up her entire face. When the cookies finally came out of the oven, some slightly burnt at the edges, Hannah applauded. We made real food. Owen bit into one of the cookies. It was a little hard, definitely too sweet, but somehow it was perfect. These are the best cookies I've ever eaten, he declared. Hannah's smile widened even further, and Owen realized how she blossomed with every word of approval, every small compliment, as if her whole life had been marked by the lack of these simple confirmations that she was doing something right, that she was valued. He promised himself he would never be stingy with praise, never fail to celebrate her accomplishments, no matter how small. One Sunday afternoon, as they walked through the garden, Hannah suddenly stopped in front of a flower bed. Look, she exclaimed, pointing to a blue butterfly that had landed on a flower. It's so beautiful. Owen observed the fragile insect, its wings shimmering in the sun. At another time, he would barely have noticed something so common. Now, through Hannah's eyes, he saw the extraordinary beauty in the ordinary. "Do you know why butterflies have such beautiful colors?" he asked. Hannah shook her head, curious. "To attract other butterflies." "That too, but mainly to protect themselves. Bright colors warn predators that they might be poisonous." "Wow," Hannah said, impressed. "How do you know so much?" Owen smiled. "I read. And now you can read too, and discover things like that." Hannah nodded, determined. "I'm going to read all the books in the world. All of them." "Well, maybe not all of them," she reconsidered. "Only the interesting ones." Owen chuckled, a sound that was becoming increasingly familiar in a house that once knew only silence. That night, at bedtime, Hannah showed Owen a thin book they had bought the previous week, her first attempt at reading a complete story by herself. "Can I try reading to you tonight?" she asked, shyly. "I'd love that," Owen replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. Hannah opened the book, took a deep breath, and began. Slowly, with some pauses to decipher more difficult words, she read the story of a rabbit who wanted to reach the moon. Owen helped occasionally, but let her figure out the words on her own whenever possible. When she finished the last page, Hannah closed the book with an expression of pure triumph. "I read it. I read the whole book." "You did it," Owen confirmed, feeling his chest swell with pride. "I knew you could." Hannah threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. "You're the best dad in the world," she whispered. Owen froze for a moment. It was the first time Hannah had called him that, Dad. Not an Owen, not Sir, but Dad. He felt something warm and wet in his eyes, an emotion so intense he couldn't name it. "And you're the best daughter," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. When he finally put her to sleep, he turned on the hallway light as he always did and left the door ajar. "Good night, Daddy," Hannah said sleepily, her eyes already closing. "Good night, my little one," Owen replied. Back in his room, he sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the framed paper, with his name written in Hannah's imperfect handwriting. A small victory, one among so many they had shared in recent months. The diagnosis, the medication, the regular appointments, all of it was still part of his reality. But somehow, they had lost their centrality in his life. What mattered now were the colorful drawings on the walls, the bedtime stories, the crooked cookies, and that word, Dad, spoken so naturally that it seemed like it had always been that way. And perhaps Owen thought this was the greatest victory of all. The darkness was thick, almost palpable. Owen ran through a labyrinth of empty streets, calling out for Hannah. His voice echoed between the buildings, but no one answered. He turned a corner and found only more deserted streets. Panic grew with every step. Suddenly, he spotted a small figure in the distance. Hannah. He ran toward her, his heart pounding in his chest. But the more he ran, the farther away she seemed. The tiny silhouette began to fade, like smoke carried by the wind. "Hannah," he cried, "don't go." She turned one last time, her small face marked by deep sadness. "You can't save me," she said, her voice strangely adult. "No one can." And then she disappeared completely. Owen woke with a violent start, sitting up in bed. His heart was pounding so hard it hurt, and his sleep shirt was drenched in sweat. For a moment, he was disoriented, the remnants of the nightmare still too vivid. He glanced at the digital clock on his nightstand. 3:17 a.m. The house was silent, terribly silent. The irrational fear from the dream persisted, refusing to dissipate even now that he was awake. What if Hannah wasn't in her room? What if everything, the meeting, the months together, the shared small joys, had been just a long dream from which he had finally woken? Without turning on the light, he got up and left the room. The hallway was lit only by the faint security light they left on overnight. He moved quickly, his bare feet silent on the carpet, until he stopped in front of Hannah's bedroom door. He hesitated, his hand on the doorknob. It would be ridiculous to enter just because of a nightmare. She would be sleeping peacefully, of course. But the fear persisted, coiled in his stomach like a cold serpent. Carefully, he turned the doorknob and opened the door just enough to peek inside. The soft glow of the moon-shaped nightlight, which Hannah insisted on keeping on overnight, revealed the colorful and cozy room. And there, in the center of the bed with star and planet blankets, she was. Hannah slept deeply, her dark hair spread across the pillow, one arm flung to the side and the other tightly around Ted, her inseparable teddy bear. Her chest rose and fell in a tranquil rhythm. Occasionally, her lips moved, as if she were talking in her dreams. The relief Owen felt was almost physical, as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. She was there. Safe, protected. He silently entered the room and closed the door behind him. Instead of going back to his bed, he went to the reading armchair in the corner, the one where he sat every night to tell stories. He sank into the soft seat, his eyes never leaving the small sleeping figure. Hannah stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible, then quieted again. The soft light of the nightlight cast gentle shadows on her face, highlighting the smooth curve of her cheek, her long eyelashes against her skin. Owen felt something strange in his chest, an emotion for which he had no adequate name. It wasn't just love, though that was there too, growing every day. It was something more complex, a mixture of wonder, gratitude, and a deep fear he now fully recognized. The fear of losing her. Not just in the literal sense, as in the nightmare, but in every possible way. And there were so many. The adoption process could encounter obstacles. Someone with more legal rights could appear. Or worse, his heart condition could take away what mattered most now. Time. Time to see her grow, learn, become the extraordinary person she was already beginning to reveal herself to be. The doctor had scheduled new exams for the following week. Owen had been postponing them, finding excuses, scheduling important meetings at the same times, as if, by avoiding the exams, he could also avoid the reality of his condition. But now, looking at Hannah, he knew he could no longer run. He had to face the truth, whatever it was. For her. To ensure that, no matter what happened to him, she would always be safe, always loved. Hannah turned in bed, hugging her teddy bear more tightly. A small smile appeared on her lips, as if her dream was much more pleasant than Owen's. He had never imagined this for himself. Family, parenthood. In fact, he had actively decided against it, convinced that the world of business was all he needed or wanted. Relationships were complicated, unpredictable, children, even more so. They were an emotional risk he wasn't willing to take. How wrong he was. Now sitting in that armchair in the middle of the night, watching a child who, until a few months ago, was a complete stranger, Owen understood what he had truly avoided throughout his adult life. Vulnerability. The risk of loving someone more than himself, of putting another person's happiness and well-being above his own. It was terrifying. And it was the most extraordinary thing he had ever experienced. The first few months with Hannah had transformed his house. The previously impersonal walls now displayed colorful drawings. The silent corridors echoed with laughter and curious questions. The dining table, once used only when unavoidable, was now the center of lively conversations about the school day, new friends, surprising discoveries. But the biggest transformation had been within himself. Owen Faulkner, the reclusive billionaire, the man who had built a financial empire but completely neglected his personal life, now discovered what it truly meant to live. It wasn't about acquisitions or mergers, about bank accounts or properties. It was about shared moments, pancakes on Sunday mornings, bedtime stories. The expression on Hannah's face when she finally managed to tie her own shoes. It was these small things, these seemingly insignificant moments, that suddenly held all the meaning in the world. Hannah sighed in her sleep, a sound so small and confident that something tightened in Owen's chest. She trusted him completely. She relied on him. And he had discovered that he needed her as much as she needed him. He was no longer alone, and the truth was, he didn't want to be anymore. The idea of returning to that solitary existence, to the silent, empty mansion, was unbearable now. They had found each other by chance, on a cold night that could easily have been like any other. An improbable encounter that had changed everything. Two lonely people who, together, had discovered what it meant to be a family. Owen leaned back in the armchair, his eyes still fixed on the small sleeping figure. The fear persisted, of course. Perhaps it always would. But alongside it was something stronger, determination. He would do everything he could to stay by her side, to be the father she deserved, for as long as he had. And as he watched his daughter's peaceful sleep, he made a decision. He would call the doctor in the morning. It was time to face the truth, whatever it was, for her, for them. The morning after the nightmare, Owen dialed the number he had avoided for months. Dr. Harris's office, good morning. This is Owen Faulkner. I need to schedule an appointment with Dr. Harris as soon as possible. Mr. Faulkner, the receptionist replied with a tone of recognition. We've been trying to reach you. The doctor asked to reschedule your follow-up tests. Owen felt a pang of guilt. He had purposely ignored the office calls, as if avoiding the tests could somehow halt the progression of his illness. We have an opening tomorrow at 10 a.m. Would that be possible? Yes, I'll be there. When he hung up, he remained seated for a few minutes, staring at Hannah's photo on his desk. He had to know how much time he had left. He needed to prepare everything to ensure she would be safe, even when he was no longer there. The office door slowly opened, and Hannah peeked inside, already dressed for school, her colorful backpack on her back. It's time, she announced, stepping into the room. Then she paused, observing him closely. You look sad. Owen was constantly surprised by the intuition of that 5-year-old child. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, he finally admitted, crouching down to her height. Nothing to worry about, just a checkup. Is it the heart doctor? She asked, surprising him. How do you know about that? I heard you talking to Martha. And you take medicine every morning, looking at it like it's bad. Owen felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't been as discreet as he thought. Yes, it's the heart doctor, but don't worry. Can I come too? She asked, concern evident on her small face. Better not this time. Martha will stay with you. I promise we'll do something fun afterward. Hannah studied his face, as if searching for signs that he was hiding something. Okay. But you have to promise you'll be okay. Owen felt a tightness in his chest. How could he promise something he had no control over? I'll do my best, he replied, extending his pinky finger. Hannah intertwined her tiny finger with his, sealing the promise. The next day, after dropping Hannah off at school, Owen drove to the doctor's office. The waiting room hadn't changed. The same neatly arranged magazines, the same abstract paintings, the same respectful silence. The nurse called him 15 minutes later, leading him first to the exam room. Electrocardiogram, blood pressure, blood draw. Owen observed everything with a sense of inevitability. Whatever the result, he had to face it head-on. For Hannah. Finally, he was led into Dr. Harris's office, a man in his 60s, with graying hair and shrewd eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. Owen, it's been a while, the doctor said, extending his hand. Then we were worried about you. I've been busy, I imagine. The doctor opened a thick folder, examining results and charts. It's not typical of you to postpone important appointments. Owen didn't answer. Dr. Harris had known him for 15 years, long enough to notice changes in his behavior. Well, the doctor finally said, leaning back in his chair. I must say I'm surprised. Owen's heart sped up. Surprised how had the disease progressed more rapidly? Your condition has stabilized, Dr. Harris continued, adjusting his glasses. In fact, I see signs that the progression of your cardiomyopathy has not only slowed down, but, in some aspects, has regressed. Owen blinked, trying to process the words. What exactly does that mean? The doctor pulled out some sheets with graphs. Look at these cardiac markers. Last time, the trend was constant worsening. That's why your prognosis was so limited. He pointed to a downward line. Now, observe the evolution in recent months. The line had stabilized and then started to rise slightly. Your response to the medication is exceptionally good. Your blood pressure has normalized. The stress tests show better than expected cardiac capacity. Even your cortisol levels are significantly reduced. A wave of relief washed over Owen's body. How long? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. The doctor removed his glasses, cleaning them thoughtfully. It's hard to say precisely. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy remains a serious condition. He put his glasses back on, looking directly at Owen. But with this rate of response to treatment, we're talking about years, not months, possibly many years, with proper monitoring. Years. The word echoed in Owen's mind. Years to see Hannah grow up. Years to build memories. Years he didn't expect to have. Let me be frank, Dr. Harris continued. In my 30 years of cardiology, I've rarely seen such a significant reversal in a severe case like yours. Medicine has its explanatory limits, but something important has clearly changed. The doctor leaned forward. What has changed in your life, Owen? Your physiology shows signs of someone who has undergone a significant transformation. Owen felt a faint smile form on his lips. A child, he replied simply. The doctor raised his eyebrows, clearly not expecting this answer. You adopted? We're in the final stages. A 5-year-old girl. Interesting. Dr. Harris made a note. And how has this experience been for you? Owen thought of Hannah, her morning laughter, the bedtime stories, the colorful drawings adorning the mansion walls. Transformative. It changed everything. Well, the doctor said, leaning back with a smile, it seems this child is exactly what the doctor would order, if we knew how to prescribe something like that. There's ample literature on the positive effects of emotional connections on cardiovascular health, but we rarely see such dramatic results. When he left the office, Owen felt as if he had been given a second chance at life. The sky seemed bluer, the air sweeter. The city around him pulsed with possibilities. Instead of returning to the office, he drove to the shopping center. He entered a jewelry store where he was a known client. Mr. Faulkner, how can I help you today? I'm looking for something special, a gift for my daughter. The word daughter still felt new on his lips, yet strangely natural. After examining several pieces, he chose a delicate silver necklace with a star-shaped pendant. Hannah loved stars. They spent hours in the garden on clear nights, identifying constellations. At the school exit, Hannah ran to him, hugging his legs tightly. How was the doctor's? She asked immediately, holding his face between her small hands. It was very good. In fact, it was better than I expected. You're not going to be sick. Not for a long time, he replied, helping her into the car. Hannah smiled, satisfied. I have a surprise, Owen said. Today we're going out to dinner to celebrate. Celebrate what? Life. Time. Us? Owen chose a restaurant in the city's Central Park, not one of the luxurious establishments he frequented for business, but a simple, welcoming place with outdoor tables under old trees and a visible small playground. They sat at a table near a fountain. Hannah swung her legs, unable to reach the ground as she examined the colorful children's menu. I want spaghetti and meatballs, she declared. Excellent choice. After the waiter took their orders, Owen took a small package wrapped in silver paper with blue stars from his pocket. I have a gift for you. Hannah's eyes widened. Even after months, she was still surprised by gifts, as if each one was an unexpected wonder. Why? It's not my birthday. Sometimes we give gifts just because we want to make someone happy, because we love that person. Hannah slowly untied the ribbon, preserving the decorated paper. When she opened the small box and saw the star necklace, her mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. It's beautiful, she whispered, touching the pendant with her fingertips. Is it really for me? Really? Do you want me to put it on you? Owen fastened the delicate clasp behind her neck. Hannah touched the silver star that now rested against her shirt. I'll wear it forever, she promised, with the seriousness only a child can imbue such a statement. When the food arrived, they ate in comfortable silence. Owen watched Hannah twirl the spaghetti on her fork, as he had taught her, her tongue peeking out of the corner of her mouth in concentration. Hannah, he said finally, do you remember when we first met? That cold night? She nodded, taking a forkful of pasta to her mouth. Before you came along, I had received the worst news of my life, Owen continued, choosing his words carefully. Doctors told me I was sick, very sick, that my heart wasn't working properly. Hannah stopped eating, her eyes fixed on his. I thought I didn't have much time, he went on. I was alone, wandering aimlessly when I found you, and something Something changed at that moment. You asked me to be your daughter, Hannah recalled. Yes, it was the best question I've ever asked in my life. Owen smiled, feeling a growing emotion in his throat. But you came into my life and changed everything. I'm a much better person for having you with me. And you know what? My heart is better too. Hannah frowned, trying to understand. The doctor today said I'm getting better, that I can live much longer than we thought, and I think you have something to do with it. I healed you, Hannah asked, her eyes wide. Owen smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. In a way, yes, you gave me something to live for. A reason to take care of myself, to strive. You taught me to see beauty in things I had never noticed before. Hannah considered him for a long moment, her small face serious and thoughtful. Then, with the direct simplicity only a child could possess, she said, I love you. The words hit Owen like a physical wave. In all his adult life, he couldn't remember hearing or saying those words. Not even in previous relationships, always kept at a safe distance. He felt his eyes well up with tears that he didn't try to hold back. I love you too very much, my little one, he replied, his voice choked with emotion. Hannah smiled, satisfied, and returned to eating her spaghetti, seemingly oblivious to the monumental impact her 3 simple words had caused. After dinner, as they walked hand in hand back to the car, Hannah talked about the stars beginning to appear in the sky. Now I have a star here, she said, touching the pendant. Shy and many up there. The North Star always shows the way home, Owen commented. Sailors used it so they wouldn't get lost at sea. How did you find me? Hannah asked, the transition of thought making sense only in childlike logic. I think it was the other way around, Owen replied. You found me. I was lost until that night. When they arrived home, Owen asked Hannah to join him in the study. In the study, he pulled an elegant folder from his desk and sat on the sofa with her. Today I received something very important, he said, opening the folder. Hannah looked at the documents with interest, though she still couldn't read most of the words. What is it? These are the final papers for your adoption, Owen explained, showing her a page with official seals. They've been approved. They mean that, legally, I am your father, and you are my daughter, forever. Hannah's eyes widened. Forever, really? Really? No one can separate us. It's official now. Hannah studied the papers, running her fingers over the golden seal and the signatures. And we're going to live together forever, she asked, her small voice suddenly serious. Yes, Owen confirmed, feeling the weight and joy of the promise. If you want, this can be your home forever. Hannah pondered for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then she nodded firmly. I want to. Owen hugged her, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck with surprising strength. He thought about how his life had changed in just a few months. From a lonely man with a death sentence hanging over his head, he had transformed into a father, with years ahead, years to build memories, to watch this extraordinary child grow, and all because of a chance encounter on a cold night. A moment that could easily not have happened, a detour on the path that had changed absolutely everything. Daddy, Hannah said, testing the word as if trying it out officially for the first time. Yes, Owen replied, savoring the title that was now legally his. I'm glad you found me that night. Me too, my little star, he whispered, kissing the top of her head. It was the night that changed everything. As Hannah snuggled into his arms, Owen thought that perhaps true miracles were silent, disguised as coincidences. A lonely child and a lonely man, finding each other at the exact moment they needed each other most. Autumn had arrived, painting the garden trees in shades of red and in gold. 6 months had passed since Owen and Hannah met that cold night, 6 months that transformed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The house, once silent and empty, now overflowed with life. Colorful drawings adorned the walls. Children's books shared space with financial reports on the shelves. Toys appeared in the most unlikely places. A plush dinosaur on the formal living room sofa, a forgotten doll on the piano bench no one had touched in years. That Sunday afternoon, Owen had a surprise planned. After lunch, he called Hannah to the garden. "I have a present for you," he said as they walked along the stone path that snaked through the well-kept flower beds. "Another one?" Hannah asked, skipping beside him, the silver star dangling from her neck. She never took it off, not even to sleep. "This one is special, something we can share." They reached a more secluded part of the garden, near the stone wall that bordered the property. There, between two old trees, Owen had a swing set installed, not a common playground swing, but a solid wooden double swing with space for two. Hannah stopped, her eyes wide. "Is it for us?" she asked, approaching slowly, as if fearing the swing might disappear if she ran to it. "For us," Owen confirmed. "To talk, to watch the sunset, to tell stories." Hannah ran her hand over the polished wooden seat, testing it with reverence. "I've never had a swing before." "Me neither," Owen admitted, "not even when I was a child." They sat side by side. Owen gave a gentle push with his feet, initiating a smooth back-and-forth motion. Hannah laughed with each swing, holding onto the side chain with one hand and Owen with the other. "Higher!" she pleaded. Owen increased the momentum, and soon they were swinging in a wide, tranquil arc. The autumn wind ruffled Hannah's hair, which now reached her shoulders, shinier and healthier than when he had first met her. "It feels like we're flying," she said, looking up at the sky. "Or like the birds." Owen agreed. They swung in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the moment, the movement, each other's company. Owen was constantly surprised by Hannah's ability to live in the present. She didn't worry about tomorrow or regret yesterday. She simply existed fully in each moment. It was a lesson he was still learning. "Hannah," he said as the swing naturally slowed, "I've been thinking about something." "What?" she asked, looking at him curiously. "About our last name. Would you like to have the same last name as me?" Hannah considered the question, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Would I be Hannah Faulkner?" "Yes. Legally, you're already my daughter, but we can make it official in your name too." "What happened to my other last name?" The question caught Owen by surprise. In the adoption papers, Hannah was registered only with her first name, no known last name. "What was your last name before?" he asked gently. Hannah shrugged. "I don't know. No one ever called me by a last name." Owen felt his heart ache, imagining such a small child without even the anchor of a full name, a partial identity, as if her existence was only temporary. "Then this will be a new beginning for both of us," he said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Hannah Faulkner." She smiled, testing the name in a whisper. "Hannah Faulkner. I like how it sounds." "Me too," Owen agreed. The sun began to set on the horizon, casting a golden light over the garden. Shadows lengthened, and the air grew cooler. "I think we should mark this moment," Owen said, taking a small camera from his pocket. "How about a picture of us here?" "Yes," exclaimed Hannah, excited. She loved photos, although she had rarely been photographed before living with Owen. "Let's sit there," he suggested, pointing to a stone bench under an apple tree laden with red fruit. They walked there hand in hand. Owen sat down, and Hannah, spontaneously, climbed onto his lap. "Like this?" she asked, settling in. "Oh, perfect," Owen replied, extending his arm to position the camera. "Wait," Hannah asked. She adjusted her star necklace so it was visible and smoothed out the blue dress she was wearing. "Now, yes," Owen smiled, not at the camera, but at the seriousness with which she approached that moment. How every little thing was special to Hannah. "On three now, say it's our home, okay?" "Okay. 1, 2, 3. Our home," they said together, smiling at the camera. The flash went off, capturing the moment. Owen with his arm around Hannah, she on his lap with her small hand resting on his shoulder, both smiling, not the formal smiles of studio photographs, but genuine smiles, the kind that come from within and reach the eyes. Later, while Hannah was bathing, Owen transferred the photo to his computer. He looked at the image for a long time, feeling an emotion that still surprised him with its intensity. There they were, a man who thought he had everything, until he discovered he had nothing that truly mattered, and a girl who had nothing, until she discovered she could have what mattered most, someone to love and be loved in return. He had the photograph printed in high quality. The next day, he brought home a simple yet elegant silver photo frame, He placed the photo inside and positioned it on the central table in the living room, the place of honor, where everyone who entered the house could see it. "Look, Hannah," he called as the girl came down for dinner. "What do you think?" Hannah approached the table, observing the framed photograph. Her eyes sparkled as she touched the glass surface with her fingertips. "It's us," she said, her voice full of admiration. "Our family." "Yes," Owen confirmed, crouching beside her. "Our family." Hannah continued looking at the photo, as if trying to memorize every detail. Then she turned to Owen with a serious expression. "When people come to visit, they'll see we're a real family." "They already know that," Owen said, touched by her concern. "But now there's proof," Hannah insisted, pointing to the photograph. "Like in the adoption papers, it's official." Owen smiled, understanding what she meant. For a child who had lost so much, who had been abandoned and forgotten, tangible proofs of belonging were essential. The photo was not just an image, it was a testament, a declaration that she had a permanent place in the world. "You're right," he agreed. "It's our official proof." That night, after putting Hannah to bed, Owen returned to the living room. He sat on the sofa, contemplating the photograph illuminated by the soft light of the lamps. It was strange how a simple piece of paper could hold so much meaning. There was the visual record of his transformation, from mansion to home, from wealth to abundance, from loneliness to family. In a few short months, a child found by chance had taught him what truly mattered. And he, without realizing it, had offered her what every human being desires most, a place to call her own, a place where she was unconditionally accepted, loved simply for existing. A home, not walls and a roof, not expensive furniture or valuable works of art. A home made of shared moments, laughter, small daily discoveries, tears sometimes, hugs, bedtime stories. A home built not with bricks, but with affection, overcoming adversity and true love. The photograph in the silver frame was just a visible symbol of something much greater, something Owen and Hannah had built together, day after day, since that cold night when their paths crossed. Something that, Owen now knew, would last far beyond his own existence. Because a true home transcends time. It lives in memories, in lessons learned, in transformed hearts. And that, he thought, looking at the smiling faces in the photograph, was the most precious legacy he could ever leave. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.